So the Senate is still up for grabs, but cannabis legalization took a major step forward as voters in Maryland and Missouri voted to legalize recreational marijuana. That adds more than 12 million Americans to those with access to the cannabis market. Now, Maryland lawmakers will now decide on licensing and taxation, while in Missouri, a 6% sales tax will go in part towards facilitating automatic expungement for certain nonviolent marijuana offenses. Cannabis could not break through, however, in the Deep South as Arkansas voted down a ballot measure, as did North and South Dakota. Marijuana will now be legal in 21 states, plus Washington, D.C. How'd pot stocks do today? They all got a pretty nice bounce, though it's come back in the last couple of hours. Looked a lot better at about noon our time, but has fallen back down to earth, as we see quite often with cannabis optimism. It usually comes back down to earth. For more on the cannabis investor story, and of course the fallout from the crypto rattling news from FTX and Binance, we're joined by Cowen Washington Research Group Managing Director Jaret Seiberg. Jaret, good to see you. So let's start quickly, if we can, on cannabis. For whatever optimism there was about a potential lame duck deal or down the road federal legalization, how, if at all, do the midterms change that?
Well, great question and great place to start. So the lame duck technically begins today, in reality next week, and in super reality, it's probably going to be after the Georgia special election that you guys are just talking about. That leaves precious little time to get a deal done, but we still think you can get the SAFE Act on cannabis banking combined with some funding to help expunge some state-level criminal convictions. That's still the type of deal that can get done, even if the lame duck is really only 2 weeks long. And so I think there's still a reason for some optimism this year. As for next year, it's always all about the Senate when it comes to cannabis. And the difference between a Republican Senate led by Mitch McConnell is enormous relative to a Democratic Senate led by Chuck Schumer. With Mitch McConnell at the helm, we're just not going to get a major cannabis bill on the floor.
And so then in terms of some of the headwinds that you see in really getting these things passed, what are still some of the outstanding arguments?
So, I know you've been showing the map of the election results from last night. You look up in the middle center of the map, you have North and South Dakota, and, they are red states, and they just voted down, cannabis ballot initiatives yesterday. And so what is that telling us? It's telling us that there is still a pocket of conservatism out there where lawmakers are not feeling the pressure at home to go along with some of the generational changes that we're seeing among the electorate on cannabis issues. So as long as you have that disconnect where you have Republicans not feeling the pressure from voters to change their position, we're going to have trouble in the Senate.
Just an odd theory here. I can't help but think that optimism, and I had that over lame duck deal on safe banking plus in the Senate, is now squashed by SBF and by this collapse of FTX, because now it looks like there's urgency to get something done on crypto, on Bitcoin, to stave off another disaster. How urgent is the Congress, is the Senate to get something done on regulation in crypto?
So, one of the things that we've been telling clients for months now about the lame duck, and the reason you can never say anything has a 90% or an 85% certainty in Washington is that you always have the unexpected that can crop up and completely wipe out expectations for a legislative session, in this case, the lame duck. And certainly crypto could be that. I would say that as of now, the troubles with FTX and investors involved in FTX seems to be mostly outside the United States. We are watching very closely what that contagion looks like. Certainly, if you're a holder of various cryptocurrencies, this hasn't been a great 12 months, but certainly hasn't been a great 72 hours or 4 or 5 days now since news of this first started coming across all of our screens. I think the bottom line here is that crypto certainly could steal the spotlight, but I still think there's been so much work done on the SAFE Act, and it has buy-in from Democratic leadership and not that many objections from Republicans, that even with the noise, I still think this could finally be the time when it gets done.
And in terms of if this does not get done during this lame duck session, and you talked about something more forward-looking then, what are the options? Will it be a more piecemeal option, perhaps that doesn't involve the decriminalization part and just the focus on the banking?
Yeah, so, we don't really have decriminalization or legalization as part of any of the bills that are realistic at this point. It could get really interesting if the Senate stays Democratic and the House goes Republican. Representative Nancy Mace from South Carolina has a sort of more conservative, more piecemeal approach to legalization. I think that could get some attention. There's also a couple of bills out there that would instruct the government to start preparing for legalization. But to us, the most interesting way to force Congress to act is going to be through the courts and through a theory called nullification. Supreme Court Justice Thomas raised it. It's basically the idea that if the federal government isn't enforcing the law, then it should be up to each state to decide. It basically gives you the States Act only through the courts, and that's a really strong way to try to pressure Congress or force Congress to address the issue.
There's certainly a lot of ways to skin this cat indeed. Cowen Washington Research Group Managing Director Jaret Seiberg, thank you so much.